Okay, so let's talk census. The United States Census. This week, the Department of Commerce, basically at the urging of the President and the Department of Justice in the Trump administration, announced that they would be adding a citizenship question to the 2020 census, which is 2 years away. And it's caused a bit of an uproar, and it has several states, including a very large state known as California, suing about it because they fear that it will lead to an undercount, that people are not going to want to respond to the census for fear that they're going to end up being deported, and it's going to result in an undercount in the district. Now, here's what the census does, boys and girls. It counts people, and it counts everybody. And it's mandated in the Constitution that the census count people every 10 years. And there's been a bit of an uproar, and an uproar coming from the right side is going to be saying, no, if it's about it, census decides how many people are in a congressional district and how many people live where, so we know how many where federal money goes. Yes, that's right. That's what the census does. Federal money for, emergency services, congressional representation is determined by the population count in the census and all of that. And so the right's going to say, well, we should only count citizens. So if we ask them if they're not a citizen, then they shouldn't count. That's not how it works, y'all. The census counts residents, people who are here, regardless of their citizenship status. The Supreme Court said so in 2016. And that it basically counts everybody, citizen or not, voting age or not, doesn't matter. If they live there in that house on April 1st of the census year, they're counted. And so there's people worried about an undercount. And no, the census does not only count citizens. And then there's the uproar from the right saying, oh, well, the citizenship question has been there before. And there's people on the left who are saying the citizenship question hasn't been in the census since 1950. And there are those on the right saying it's been in every census up until 2000. You know what? They're both right, in a way. Then there's Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who said it was there in 1965. There wasn't a census in 1965. The census only happens when the year ends in 0. Anyway. There are counts that happen all the time, but it ain't a census if it's not a year that doesn't end in 0. Okay? See, here's a lot of this information I'm going to get. And since the 2000 census is one of the bones of contention here, I'm going to let you know some background. I worked on the 2000 census. I was a crew leader during 2 segments of the census that were called non-response follow-up and coverage improvement follow-up, NARFU and CFU. And those were to deal with people who didn't fill out their census forms so that we could get the count. And I led a crew in both of those rounds. Because the census sends out a mail-out questionnaire, and people fill it out and send it back by the census day. And if they don't, then an enumerator has to come to their door to get their count, knock on their door and say how many people live here, and fill out the census form. And they kind of have to ask the questions the way that they're written there. Now, the last time, this is where the left is right, where the left is correct, the last time that a citizenship question showed up on a census document that went to every house in the United States was 1950. The right is also correct in that a citizenship question had been on every census up until the year 2000, and it wasn't there in 2010. Now, here's why. From 1970 to 2000, there were 2 versions of the census forms. One was a short form, and that short form went out to 5 houses out of 6. And that short form was all of 6 pages long, and the only reason it was that long is to allow for multiple people living in the same house. Then there was the long form, and the long form went out to 1 house in 6 on average, and it did not go to every house in the country. And that long form did, in fact, have a question of, is person 1 or is person 2 a United States citizen? They still got counted, regardless of how they answered that question. So that I got to be very clear on to all the people who say this should only count citizens. That's wrong. There's no massaging that. You're wrong. But it was the citizenship question was not on the short form, which was at the very least what every house in the United States got. And if the long forms had that question, but the long form was also asked questions about the house, how the house was built, all of that stuff. Well, for the 2010 census, the Obama administration had noticed that in 2005, before President Obama was sworn in, the Department of Commerce had started something called the American Community Survey, which happens every year. It's not a census, it's a survey. And it asked a lot of the same questions that the long form census form did. And since that happened every year and that became fully implemented by 2005, when the 2010 census rolled around, the Obama administration eliminated the long form entirely. And so the short form, what is that noise? Oh, it's a car alarm. Great. So the short form became the only census document that existed in the 2010 census. It was only the short form, which basically asks, what's your name, what's your race, and if you live there, basically. And that's all it was. So no, there was no citizenship question, because the citizenship question didn't exist on the short form since 1950. But a long form did have it, but that didn't go out to every house. What they're saying now with the citizenship question is putting it on the short form so that it goes to every house, and that has not happened since 1950. Those are the facts, and that's how it goes. Now, people were already intimidated by the short form, and people get paranoid about the census all the time. But now there's legitimate reasons. This administration likes to talk about things like border walls. They like to talk about things like Muslim bans. They like to talk about things like they like to deport immigrants that are U.S. Army combat veterans that have served multiple tours in Afghanistan. That happened this week. So yeah, people who are immigrants, even if they have legal status, are going to be paranoid that this government, run by Donald Trump, are going to kick them out if they answer that they are not a citizen on their census document. It's an unfounded claim, because current law, the administration would have to change current law, because you've got 72 years of privacy about your census documents. So there's that. But yeah, the question should not be there. It hasn't been there going out to every house in 68 years. But yeah, you know what? If you want to say it was there in 2000, it was. On the long form, that went out to 1 in 6 households in the United States. And I'll tell you what, from non-response follow-up experience, those are the ones that people didn't want to fill out.